Hello, I'm Arthur, and this is my wife, Teresa.
Hello.
And this is Reason Together. This is number 3 in the series about the invisible versus visible church. We've gone through, in the first episode, the Protestant definition of the invisible church. Second episode, we did the early church. Was it invisible then? In this episode, we'll be discussing the allegorical models and the logic of God's body, the church, being the elect that only God can know.
Yeah, because that's what the Calvin said, that the invisible church, that is the elect that only God can know.
So Calvin turned the big C Catholic into the little c Catholic. And the little c Catholic is invisible. There's some of the allegorical ways Christians have always seen the church. Can they be the elect only known to God, or as Calvin termed it, the invisible church? It's the invisible because the people are hidden from our knowledge.
That's right.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's discuss these allegorical terms that people have described the church as.
Right.
Now, can these be invisible?
Right. So one would be the ark. It preserves animals and humans.
Would you say, just very quickly, can that be invisible?
No.
In other words, can it be unknown
No.
to anybody but God?
Cannot.
The ark, you better know what the ark is. It better be a visible ark.
Right.
An actual ark that you can walk in, not an ark in your heart.
Right.
The mystical body, his bride. Could that be, even though it's mystical, can somebody's bride be unknown to the husband?
No.
Well, and actually, it would be unknown to the children.
Right.
The husband would know who it is, but it would be the children.
And his family kingdom, Christ's family kingdom.
Yeah, so that would be, can you have a kingdom where there's brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers in there without it being known to the people? That would be very difficult.
That would be weird. No. God's
household is another allegorical term for God's kingdom. And his temple, the body, it's his body, the temple, which is an allegory for the temple in Jerusalem. Right. So any of those possible to be hidden?
Can be.
And the vine of the vineyard is another one.
Right.
So these allegorical terms need to be someplace you can go, you can recognize. It needs to be, these are vital things for our, not just our knowledge, but for our salvation. We need to know, especially the ark one. You better get on the ark if you're going to be saved. Okay, so that was just one point we wanted to make. And then the next one, we're going on into some logical reasons how the invisible church doesn't work. Right. It is illogical to have a invisible church.
Absurdities, would you say, arising if only the elect are part of the church. So during the Reformation, Francis de Sales, you pronounce it better than I do, was a Catholic who went...
It's Francis de Sales.
Yeah, he went to Geneva, Switzerland, and faced an entire town of Calvinists who thought Catholics...
Did you say Catholics, that he was a Catholic?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. That Catholics were their enemies and the enemies of God. He argued that Protestants do not understand the soil from which they came from. he says, Protestants, you hate your roots, but are nourished by them, which is a great statement because that's where they would have all come from, is from where the church was. Protestants created a false framework for their church. De Salle said that Protestant ministers don't have the preconditions required for their own positions. It is the absolute absurdity because it demands that Protestants make assumptions about an invisible church that will ultimately destroy itself. Principles of non-contradiction and madness. In granting their own positions, they will crush their own authority. Calvinist pastors can't claim any authority in a church that has no way of knowing if he is an authority.
Yeah, there's no way of knowing you can be an authority, and yet you say that you are. It's a self appointed authority in an invisible church.
You're right. More questions to ask about a church hidden from everyone. Can you persecute an invisible church?
Yeah, I mean, we know that we're tired.
Yeah.
We know that the early church was persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
But if this is a church that can be known only to God, how can the authorities persecute it?
Right.
Then they're just persecuting a bunch of people that we don't know are Christians or not. But anyway.
Right.
These are questions de Salle asked.
Right.
These are not ours. They're from his teachings or his book.
He also asked, where did St. Paul write to this invisible church? So how can the prophets be invisible? How does the sheep hear the shepherd's voice if he's invisible?
These are self-appointed authorities.
Mm-hmm.
And are they invisible to the entire group?
We could not know who the leaders are, even though the Bible tells us there are authorized leaders of the church.
Okay, so how this would work. This church that is hidden from everyone, that only God knows the elect that are there. Okay, so how this would work in real life. Let's say that I would read the scriptures and I would say, hey, being a Seventh-day Adventist and some even of the Jewish people said, wait a minute. A baby isn't a baby until they take their first breath after it's born. There's not a soul in it. It's just nothing but material. You may have a completely fully formed baby, but since it doesn't have a soul, it's not really that important. That's a lot of the Adventists, and in every single one of, what Adventists believe, they say that a child does not have a soul until its first breath. Okay, so I read that. I'm like, wow, okay. So I believe it's okay to abort a child up until the first breath. Well, so somebody hears me and go, whoa, Teresa, you are so far off. You are not reading that correctly. And so they say, come on, let's look over it together. And I say, no. And according to Matthew 16, they bring two or three people to witness against me. And finally, we take it to the church. And so now this church kicks me out for promoting abortion. And I just decided, okay, I'm just going to go to another church that agrees with me. Because I don't think it's a sin to have an abortion. So I'm going to go find a church that's okay with that. Okay, one is right and the other church is wrong. Now, is that what Christ meant? Is that what he really wanted? Is little tiny, okay, if the only God can know the elect, who has the authority then? There needs to be a visible church authority that can say to me what is right and wrong. And not this position where I can go to I'm just going to go get into a church here and then I'm good. Then I'm a Christian. If I find one that agrees with me on abortion, that cannot be what God originally intended. And this is how this invisible church is going to work.
Right.
So you just end up going to the church that accepts your views or desires at the time.
St. John says, they were never of us. Who can say who the Antichrist was if the church is invisible? How can we know they came out of us if we can't know and see who us is?
Right. So
There's
the
so many things.
Antichrist-
Right.
Yeah, we can't know that.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so Dussal says, he takes everything back to Eden. He says, the problem with this invisible idea of only the elect are known by God goes back to the question that Adam and Eve asked. They said, well, especially Eve. Now, did God really say that? You're questioning and kind of making yourself your own authority.
Mm-hmm.
Everything of all these heresies, of all this, come back to that question. In the end, de Sales believed that for Calvinists, everything drives them into a relativistic, arbitrary, solipsistic individualism.
The greatest scandal of all times is not that the church is corrupt, but that man will not submit himself to God and his church. Christians who study de Sales' arguments conclude Calvinist hermeneutics are solipsistic individualism.
These are some pretty big words that are thrown out by theologians. So let's break this down. What is solipsistic individualism?
It is the belief that only your own experiences and existence can be known or are important.
Okay, so this idea of an invisible church creates this system where your experiences and your existence are the only things that can be known and are important.
It's like the ultimate egocentrism.
Oh, yeah, that's a good, well, that's a good way of putting it, but it's plain and blunt. Okay, so then the next thing that he says is they come with the idea of a Calvinist moral theology. And what do they call that?
Relativistic.
Or it's, self-assumed.
Or self-assumed.
Okay.
Ecclesiology, which is anarchistic.
Yeah, so they're anarchists.
Right.
So this is what the scholars, not ours, this is what the scholars who study Calvinist,
right,
and especially not just Calvinism, this is the de Sales view of Calvinism, because de Sales wrote lots about
right,
his experience in Geneva.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what the scholars who read his, kind of term
right,
his views of
right.
Calvinism.
Protestants have created this idea of the invisible church so they can escape the realities of people apostatizing and wicked prelates. They don't want to get down and clean up the mess.
But that's, again, we're still talking about de Sales.
What de Sales has said.
De Sales. Okay, so that's that they basically said they don't want a church with anybody bad in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is when you create a church, it's only supposed to be good people.
Right.
You have to keep breaking off whenever you find bad people in it.
Right.
Now,
right.
But this is how they solve that problem, because they know that that's an infinite regress. But what they do with that is to say there is this amorphous, hidden church among all these wicked people that only God knows. Mm-hmm. So that's the Calvinist, at least our understanding. If there are Calvinists out there who we would love for you to tell us what we're getting wrong, because we're not trying to we're just telling you what we've studied, and we could get it wrong just because we're saying it. So many times Adventists that talk to you say, oh, you don't understand Adventism. Then the Calvinists say, oh, the Catholics are getting the Calvinism all wrong. And then you have the Catholics that say everybody's getting us all wrong. And that's true. There's a truth to that. You have to really get in the brain and the premises. They're all different premises and worldviews, and so you have to understand it. Like we don't want to straw man the Calvinist arguments. We want to make sure we get it right. So let us know if we're getting it wrong. Okay, so De Salle says, in the end, his view is that Jesus commands obedience even to the reprobate Pharisees. So the kingdom is full. The true church
do
can
as they
even be
say,
full.
not as they do. Yeah.
Yeah. The true church, the true visible church can even have the bad guys in it.
Right. And he continues with, the historical and eschatological church is made up of those who will apostatize. The Holy Ghost gave them authority, but that some will fall away. Acts 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can find that in Acts 20.
Right. In a visible church that God started, the church itself would be fine even if there were corrupt leadership, because it is God's framework that he is in charge of. We're sheep. We don't have to recognize the elect. We cannot see hearts. But what we can do is simple. All we have to do is be obedient to the visible church Christ started.
Okay, so this particular series about the invisible church isn't really dealing with our Seventh-day Adventist brothers and sisters, because the truth is Adventists believe in a visible church because their last day prophecies depend upon a certain people coming into the established Adventist church.
And that's the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
The Seventh-day Adventist Church, yeah. Okay, so the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the sole remnant. They're the little flock. And it's not just theological for them. A lot of people think, oh, well, if I get my theology right, then I'm going to be okay. If I follow the Sabbath and I get all the theology correct, I'm going to be okay. But no, that's not actually what Adventists teach. They do not believe it's okay to be a Seventh-day Baptist, at least in the end times. Now, right now, according to them, everybody's okay until the Sunday law. But once the Sunday law is passed, then you're not going to be okay if you're a Seventh-day Baptist. Even if you're a Catholic who goes to church on Saturday, it's not going to be okay, because they are the visible church of God. And so they would not necessarily fit into what we've been talking about, because they do not believe like other Protestants do about the invisible church.
Right. Yes, God does an invisible healing on our hearts, but it always will produce visible results. The invisible church is nothing more than a type of Gnosticism, or demonizing of the material, through Docetism, which is making Christ a phantom.
We've got one more on this particular topic of the invisible church.
So what's next is, why is being a visible church so vital, so important?
Okay, good job, honey. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for watching, and come back for the next.
He's tired. My husband he's such a good sport. I'm the one that puts these together, and he just comes on to help me and to add gravitas. And sometimes he gets so tired from working, because he works 13 hours a day in the hospital. And he's such a good sport for helping me in doing these.
Well, thank you very much. God bless you, and come back for number 4.
Thank you. Be holy.
Thank you. Be holy. Bye-bye.